Hey everybody, today we're going to take a look at some polling that came out over the past few days. We've got Michigan governor, the leader for the Democrats, and then a little bit of polling about how Trump is doing. But first, we're going to start here in New Hampshire. This is going to be for the U.S. Senate race next year. It's going to be an open seat now after Jeanne Shaheen announced her retirement. Now, the headline here is Sununu leads Pappas in hypothetical matchup. So we're going to look at this poll here. It's from Qantas Insights. It's also a long way off, and neither of these candidates has declared. But if you want to look at the methodology, it's right here. We're looking at 650 registered voters, and the margin of error is plus or minus 3.8%, and it was conducted March 17th through the 19th. Plus, they also talk about their weighting, etc. So let's get down into it. Here's the demographics we're looking at in this sample. The main thing I'm going to focus on here is 28% Democrat, 34 Republican, and 38 Independent. Usually on a federal level, the state leans a little bit bluer. On a state level, it tends to go a little redder. So let's see what we've got. If the 2026 election for a U.S. Senate in New Hampshire were held today, which of the following candidates would you be most likely to support? Former Governor Chris Sununu is at 53%. U.S. Representative Chris Pappas is at 44%. Another 3% undecided. There's been talks about Sununu running in the past, but he's declined. Now that it's an open seat and he's out of office, most Republicans are definitely going to want Sununu to make a run here. Throughout most of his governorship, he was fairly popular. Now that he's out of office as governor and Trump is in office as president, things could always change. Chris Pappas is also going to have lower name ID, given he's only in the U.S. House. But this 9% advantage here for the GOP is not a total outlier, even though parts of the base might think he's a little too moderate. That's got to be very tantalizing for Sununu to take a look at. Now, if it's not him, it could be somebody like Scott Brown for the GOP, and I think that's going to be clearly a more uphill climb. It might not even be Pappas for the Dems, it could be somebody else, but I would think Pappas would probably be the most likely candidate at this point. So we've got Sununu winning independents 52-44. He leads men by 20 points, and he's tied with women at 48. Non-college voters, he's up at 58%. More of the crosstabs are right here. Sununu is getting 94% of Republicans, 6% of Democrats. Pappas would get 91% of Dems, 4% of Republicans. So this is going to be an exciting race. We don't know if Sununu's actually going to do it, but there's no question that behind the scenes, Republican leadership is going to be nudging him in that direction. Dems are definitely hoping he decides not to run. It doesn't mean Sununu would for sure win. There's more than a year and a half left in a potentially favorable environment for the Dems, but this would easily put the Dems on the defensive on a map that they're hoping to go on offense. And we'll take a quick look here at Trump's approval rating in the Granite State. He's underwater by 5, 44% approve, 49 disapprove. And it notes here that Trump lost to Harris by just 2.8% back in 24. In 2020, it was a bigger gap at 7.3%. Should be a good midterms. We'll see what happens in this state. Next, let's go to Michigan. We've taken a look at this state a lot recently, but we've got a new one here from Mitchell Research, and this only looks at the governor's race. And they've got a sample size here of 688 likely voters. And they've got both sides right here on a graph. Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson for the Dems has a pretty commanding lead. She dwarfs the other two candidates. The Republican side is much more competitive. They've got John James and Tudor Dixon neck and neck. So let's see what they say. Well, first for the Republicans here, John James at 31, Tudor Dixon at 30. Those are the two frontrunners, but again, there's a lot of time left. And on the other side, Jocelyn Benson with a big lead at 46%. Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist, who just got into the race recently, he's clocking in at 13. He's only barely ahead of Genesee County Sheriff Chris Swanson at 11. Then it mentions Tudor Dixon and John James have leads in different parts of the state. One other piece to this puzzle is going to be independent candidate Mike Duggan. He's running as an independent. He's the current mayor of Detroit, and he used to be a Democrat. So we could be looking at a three-way race in the general election. With that, Benson is leading Tudor Dixon by just 2 points, 38-36. Mike Duggan is at 16. If it was Benson against James, not much changes. Benson is up by 3 points. Duggan still at 16%. So it's really unclear what's actually going to happen in this race, especially on the Republican side. Tudor Dixon already ran and lost to Gretchen Whitmer in 22. John James is a two-time loser in the U.S. Senate, although he did perform better than expected. And they mention here Mike Duggan. He's actually taken away a little bit more vote from the Republican side than the Democrats. It's only maybe 2%, but he's pulling in 12 from the GOP and 10 from the Dems. That seems interesting because, of course, his background is on the Democratic side. But usually independent candidates have a lot more appeal way before an election. The closer you get to an election, they tend to drop off, but that might not be the case every time. They even ask about the generic congressional ballot, and both the Dems and the Republicans are tied at 45. They also talk about the Trump endorsement that's going to be key for Republican primary voters. Then we could go down here and take a quick look at the approval ratings. Donald Trump is at 47%, 57% disapprove. But in terms of his favorability rating, that's actually slightly lower. That's going to be at 45 compared to the 47%. 49% have an unfavorable impression. And Governor Gretchen Whitmer, her approval rating is at 52%, but her favorability rating is slightly lower at 48%. 46% view her unfavorably. The rumor is, of course, she has some ambitions for president in 28. Now, this poll did not really take a look at that U.S. Senate race. That's also important next year in Michigan. Now, you could go down a little bit further and take a look at some of the specific question wording and some of the demographic breakdown. All these links will be down below in the description. I'm not going to go through it all right here. I'm going to keep it moving. We're going to take a look at the Democrats. Now, this poll came out from CNN/SSRS. This is with Democrats or Democratic-leaning independents, 504 of them. Thinking about the Democratic leaders today, which one person reflects the core values of the Democratic Party? If you're looking for a high number here, you're not going to find it. 10% is the top number, and that's held by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Kamala Harris right behind at 9%. Bernie Sanders right behind her at 8%. Then you've got Hakeem Jeffries at 6%, then Barack Obama and Jasmine Crockett at 4%, and then down from there. So I think this is an open-ended question, so the results are going to be all over the place. That's why these percentages are low. However, having said that, this also indicates there's clearly no leadership amongst the Democratic Party, at least in terms of a vision for the future and any resistance to the current administration. AOC getting 10% is not really a vote of confidence. She's going to have appeal with a certain segment of the Democrats, but others are not going to be a big fan of her at all. You could say this is kind of a leadership crisis. There's just nobody really here that jumps out. However, at the same time, given we're only a couple of months into the new administration, there doesn't necessarily have to be a clear leader with the opposition. Given nobody's at 30 or 40%, I don't think it's the end of the world. These numbers here are definitely not a good look. I think we should give it maybe another 3 or 4 months, get into the summer, see what happens. Now, if at the end of the year, heading into next year, there's still nothing close to a consensus, that still might not mean it's a bad thing, but is of course not going to be a good look when you're heading into a midterm year when you're expected to make some gains. The Dems have to figure out what direction they're going to go in. Are they just going to point to the weak points of the Trump administration and say, hey, vote for us instead? Or are they actually going to make some policy adjustments and messaging and reconnect with a wider swath of the electorate? It could be a combination of things, but as of right now, the Dems do look like they're in a state of disarray until they get things together and the perception changes. So let's move on here to Atlas Intel. Now, this is some national polling about the Trump administration, and Atlas Intel had fantastic accuracy polling the swing states in the 24 election. Now, this is not swing state polling. It's going to be more about the mood of the country. But let's see what they say anyway. We've got to go down here and get into the methodology. We've got a big sample size here, 2550. And we've got 33.7 Republican, 37.1 Independent, and 29.3 Democrat. You could look at the rest if you'd like. Now, let's get down into it. Here's the presidential approval rating. Trump underwater here by about 5, 47.3 to 52.4. That's a little bit underwater, and if we go down here, we could see it's ticked down a little bit over the past couple of months. Now, it's going to be a while before the next election, so I don't think a new administration is really going to be overly concerned about what's going on just a couple of months in. However, some of the specifics behind this might be more of a concern. Now, I'm going to go down a little bit further. Always feel free to pause it if you want to take a closer look at some of these slides. There's just a lot here. I've got to keep it moving. So let's get down here into some of the specific issues. So here's the ratings for Trump on some specifics. Nothing really jumps out that much if you look at the totals here on the right side. On immigration, he's above by 5. That's going to include excellent and good compared to poor and terrible. That's also Trump's best issue. His worst one on here is going to be war in Ukraine. That's underwater by 5. And down here, healthcare, that's underwater by 5 as well. The rest of them are going to be between those two ratings. So overall, that might indicate it's just a little bit too early still to get a sense of how he's doing. Maybe it takes 3 months, maybe it takes 6, maybe we're going to be looking at a year. Some of these issues do have a stronger and a softer level of support. You can see down here, healthcare has good at 17%, but on the other side, terrible is pretty much strong for every one of these issues. Not many people have soft negative support where they would say poor instead of terrible. So I think any administration is going to run into problems. I think they're going to cause controversy when they come in. There was a lot of dissatisfaction with the last administration, so now Trump's coming in to shake things up. Maybe he does too much and he pays a political price. Or maybe in the end, it looks like he's actually getting some things done and he has more success than anticipated. If we go down here, we can see how Trump's approval on these issues has changed over time. Now, there hasn't been a whole lot of movement here. The only one that's really gotten a couple of points worse here is going to be on the economy. That's even at 48. So a lot of stagnation here except for national debt. Looks like his approval rating was pretty low before. Now it's almost even again at 48 to 50. Immigration, he was above by 2. Now he's above by 5. So some of this actually kind of conflicts with the data we just took a look at. If his approval rating has gone down over these 2 months, why has his approval rating on these 6 issues held steady or even ticked up slightly? I think it's worth asking that question. We go down here and take a look at the Trump agenda. This asks, are you in favor or against the following policy proposals made by Trump? So the one here at the top is going to be mass deportation of undocumented immigrants. That's going to be a +3 rating. Now most of the rest of these kind of even out, but the 2 at the bottom show a dramatic drop off. That's going to be for taking control over Greenland and annexation of Canada to the US. Those 2 look to be massively unpopular. So I've said it before, but I think whoever gets into office, there's usually going to be a few things they can do that most people are going to be in support of. But then there's usually going to be some sort of an overstep, and they're going to do a few things that are not really what everybody's looking for. And down here it asks if you support or oppose the following executive orders. The most popular one here is going to be order federal workers back to the office full time. That's 24% above. That's actually higher than I was expecting. Troops to the border with Mexico. That's also 11 points above. Mandating a policy recognizing only 2 genders. That's above by 7. The lowest one on here is going to be order the Gulf of Mexico to be renamed the Gulf of America. That's underwater by 13 points. That is not surprising that that's the least popular on here. So you can look at the rest of this if you'd like, but we've got one more section here. This is going to be image of political leaders. And here we've got Trump actually at the top, tied with J.D. Vance at +51 and -49. Then they have Barack Obama on here, who's 2 points underwater at 47 positive, 49 negative. Usually Obama's image tends to be pretty positive, so that's surprising to see him underwater here. Michelle Obama is under by 4. AOC is under by 9. We've got Mike Johnson under by 2. Kamala Harris under by 15. Biden under by 26. Hillary Clinton under by 30. Gavin Newsom, he's under by 29. And Senate Majority Leader, who a lot of people have no idea who he is, he's above water by 1%. But a majority, 53%, don't know. So it looks like Thune there is riding under the radar. So the quick takeaway from me here is it's not good for Trump and the Republicans, but it just looks worse for the Dems. So I don't think there's any shortage of negative coverage of Trump by the media. It's always going to be up for debate how much of that is fair, how much of it is not fair. And on the flip side, there could actually be some things he's doing that people like. Is that getting too much coverage, just the right amount, or not enough? Let's close it out here on the positive or negative image of Trump. And this timeline goes back to last July. And there's been a little bit of fluctuation, but for the most part, it's close to even. So who knows what's really going on here? It's easy to focus on the things you like and the things you don't like. I think there's fair things to point out in different directions. But the question is, how is this going to affect voters in the upcoming elections? The sentiment about the economy could get worse, and that's obviously going to hurt Trump going into the elections. But later this year or early next year, maybe voters think the economy is not doing too bad. Maybe it's on the upswing. That's going to give him a boost. And that's why I don't think what's happening right now is particularly going to be that useful for something a year and a half down the road. So that's it. I'm going to leave it there for now. Let me know in the comments, what do you think about any of these polls? How about in New Hampshire Senate, Michigan governor? What about the leader for the Democrats? And what about this Atlas Intel poll here for Trump? Do you trust it? Do you not trust it? How do you think things could change in the future? Let me know down below on your way out. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Join if you'd like to support the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.